This video is brought to you by Skillshare, who have over 17,000 classes that could teach you a new skill to kickstart whatever project you want to work on. And the first 100 people to click the link in the description will get a free 2-month trial to Skillshare. It would be difficult to find two countries any more different from each other than North and South Korea. South Korea is an economic powerhouse with trade agreements with the European Union and America, among others, while their neighbour to the north is subject to numerous sanctions for threatening to export a nuclear warhead atop a missile. However, Korea was not always split in two, but sitting at the crossroads between the larger powers of Russia, China and Japan saw Korea being pulled by all around her, leading to Korea being divided in two. So how did this happen? Towards the end of the 19th century, the Joseon dynasty had ruled over a unified Korea for the better part of 5 centuries. This kingdom was a nominal client kingdom of China. However, China's Qing dynasty was waning, and Korea found herself wedged between the regional powers. The First Sino-Japanese War of 1894 and 1895 resulted in a clear victory for Japan, who gained the territories of Penju, Taiwan, and the Liaodong Peninsula as spoils of war, and secured the independence of Korea, with China renouncing any claims to the peninsula. Russia saw this as opposed to Russian interests, and with the support of France and Germany, diplomatically pressured Japan to repatriate some of their gains to China, which would be leased to the Russians, providing a warm water port in the Pacific. This diplomatic success cemented Russia as a power within the region and humiliated the Japanese. The now independent Korea was free to make its own associations, and with Russia's diplomatic success, Queen Min advocated stronger ties between Korea and Russia in an attempt to prevent Japanese influence in Korea. So Japan saw Queen Min as a barrier to their interests in Korea, and Japanese agents orchestrated an assassination. Korean royalty took refuge at the Russian legation, and the following year, the Empire of Korea was declared. The rivalry between Russia and Japan came to a head in 1904, with the Japanese Navy attacking the Russian Eastern Fleet at Port Arthur, China, starting the Russo-Japanese War. Japan was victorious in the hostilities, and with their victory over a European power, Japan entered the world stage as a great power. This encouraged their imperial ambitions, and Korea became a protectorate of Japan with the 1905 Protectorate Treaty. Just 5 years later, Japan annexed Korea to their colonial empire. Japan saw more victories with the First World War, entering on the side of the Allies against Germany. But while Western powers were wrecked by the war in Europe, Japan was relatively unscathed. As such, after the war, Western nations were displeased to see expansionist moves, but Japan was confident and determined not to follow the Chinese and lose their world power status. Japan's expansion into China resulted in diplomatic isolation, limiting trade, and hungry for resources. Their conquests continued until escalating to become the Pacific Theatre of the Second World War, this time on the Axis side. Korea under Japan was seeing mixed results. Japan was building infrastructure. However, with World War II to fight, Japan conscripted Korean men into the Japanese Imperial Army, and women were forced into service as sex slaves. Japan's exploitation of its fledgling colonial empire wouldn't win the war, however, and Japan would eventually unconditionally surrender, leaving the fate of their empire in Allied hands. Prior to the end of the war, the United States, United Kingdom, and Republic of China agreed that in due course, Korea shall become free and independent at the Cairo Conference. The Soviets were not present because, at the time, they were not at war with Japan. But 3 months to the day after Germany's defeat, and 2 days after the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. Soviet troops were quickly moving to engage Japan, and America worried that the entire Korean peninsula would fall under communist control. Using a National Geographic map, it was hastily decided to divide Korea in half along the 38th parallel. The Allies decided Korea would be divided in much the same way as with East and West Germany, with a trusteeship over Korea for up to 5 years in the lead up to an independent and united Korea. Unification, however, wouldn't come. With Cold War tensions building, talks between the Soviets and Americans failed to move towards a unified administration. The Soviet Union withdrew as agreed in 1948, and America withdrew the following year, leading South Korea to gain independence with general elections on the 10th of May 1948. After division, South Korea crushed communist guerrilla forces, most notably with the Bodo League massacre, where between 100,000 and 1.14 million people were executed on suspicion of supporting communism, while in the north, the Soviets installed Kim Il-sung as chairman of the North Korean branch of the Korean Communist Party. But it was Kim who convinced Stalin that the time was right to unify Korea under communism. This took some time, as Stalin initially resisted, waiting for communism to prevail in the Chinese Civil War and for their first atomic tests to be completed to deter American retaliation. But in April 1950, Stalin gave Kim permission to invade, under the condition that China would send reinforcements if needed. North Korean forces moved across the 38th parallel. The United Nations Security Council resolved to condemn the attack and recommended member states provide assistance to South Korea. The Soviet Union could have vetoed the resolution, but were boycotting in protest of the Taiwanese Republic of China and not the mainland People's Republic of China holding a permanent seat. America and other allies joined in support of South Korea, and at first it went badly for them. North Korean forces were well trained and cornered the now mainly American forces in the Pusan perimeter. But the tide turned with a change in tactics, when American forces made an amphibious landing near Seoul. Troops from the Pusan perimeter moved up to take back the south, and with air superiority, America pushed back over the 38th parallel and beyond. But this triggered China to enter the war and push the Allies back again. Fighting around the 38th parallel continued until an armistice was signed on the 27th of July 1953 to end the fighting, but not quite technically ending the war, with control of the peninsula ending very close to where it had begun, but now separated by a 4-kilometer wide demilitarized zone. The war had devastated both nations, with bombings resulting in massive damage to their economies and infrastructure. South Korea stagnated after the war, with minimal assistance provided from America. But things began to change with the April Revolution in 1960, which saw 142 people killed by police, and South Korea entered the Vietnam War on America's side, and received an allowance of more than $235 million in military procurement from the United States, and was able to industrialize and modernize. The North Korean economy, on the other hand, was at first the more robust. The Soviets and Chinese cancelled war debts and helped to rebuild, but after the collapse of the Soviet Union, aid dried up, and North Korea suffered the arduous march, a widespread famine that devastated the economy. Today, North Korea is one of the most isolated nations in the world. Internet access, for example, is only permitted with special authorization, depriving North Koreans of opportunities and information available elsewhere, such as the opportunity to learn with online video, such as with today's sponsor, Skillshare, an online learning community for creators with more than 17,000 classes available. One of the most common questions I'm asked is how I make these videos, and the answer is that I use Adobe Illustrator to create my assets and After Effects to animate it. These are immensely powerful tools that can make even the most ambitious projects a reality, but they come with a steep learning curve, and I learned how to use these by watching videos online. That's where Skillshare comes in. Skillshare has thousands of courses designed to help you learn a new skill. You could learn the skills you need to start your own YouTube channel with an easy to follow course like After Effects for beginners. Or if you're a little more advanced, check out the Mastering After Effects 10 Quick Tips videos. I learned some tricks that made animating this video easier with that very series. Whether it's a school project, a business venture, or even starting your own YouTube channel, these great tutorials will give you the perfect head start. And again, the first 100 viewers who sign up with the link below will get a free 2-month trial. After that, a premium membership begins at around $10 a month for unlimited access to learning. Thanks to Skillshare for their support, and thanks to all who help the channel.